Going here, Brian?
Yes.
All right. Hey, good afternoon. Yeah, they did. The base put you up to that?
No, I didn't know.
They won fair and square, hard fought game.
Barely.
Hey, they only got one by
They
one.
should have won by
The
that much.
whole time I was like, and then
Oh, I'm not gonna lie, that thought was going through my mind. I knew I was gonna not be there anyway, and I thought this might not work out in my favor. All right, guys, good afternoon. Though. A couple things as we get started. Yesterday was not an expected day off. We've got a 5-year-old that tested positive for flu. Doing a lot better today. He just had a fever. I know that you guys know Will Rastetter at all. He had like every symptom possible, and that was not growing, thankfully. So he had some fever and a lot of congestion, but he's doing a lot better now. Unfortunately, though, the rule is that he can't come back to school until he's been 24 hours fever-free. That would put him like at noon tomorrow, so he's obviously not going to school tomorrow. So my wife and I are alternating days. What that means is that I will not be here tomorrow. I need to stay home with him. Kind of stinks, but it is what it is, and obviously he's the priority. With that in mind, I wanted to make sure that we were clear on this. I think I've said this several times before. If I'm going to be gone for a day, this is why I try to make sure that I plan pretty far ahead so that I can see what I need to do. I'm never going to give you busy work. So yesterday with the Korea and getting into that conflict and some of the background there, it's a different style of presentation than what I might have done had I been here, but it was still me and presenting the information and having you answer some questions that went along with it. Beyond that, tomorrow we're going to hit the last topic. I've really been trying to kind of focus in on the first decade after World War II, 45 to 55, and we're going to go through some stuff today. Tomorrow, get into the last big topic, which is to discuss the second version of the Red Scare. And I think you guys had told me, right, that you read The Crucible, right? And so I'm sure that, was that for Mrs. Rutherford? Okay, so I'm sure that Mrs. Rutherford explained that was a story that was based around Joseph McCarthy and the Red Scare. So that's what we're going to get into tomorrow. And again, it's going to be a lot of me. Thankfully, we have technology now where I can still discuss and present things to you without having to physically be in the room. And that's what we're going to be working through tomorrow. The sub tomorrow, I can't remember what her name is, but continue to bring your A game, bring your respect, and I really do appreciate it. You'll need some earbuds tomorrow, but I've been trying to stress that that's something we use quite a bit in here, so make sure that you're getting your hands on them. That assignment that you get tomorrow is not due tomorrow. Thursday, once Thursday rolls around, let's be honest, Thursday, some of you won't be here, and those of you that are here will be here only in body and probably not in mind, because it's the day before spring break, right? So it is what it is. Thursday, for this class at least, is going to be a let's wrap things up kind of day. Your journals will be due on Thursday, 7 through 12. Obviously, last one's up here. They are all updated on the website as well. So if you need any of those, you can get on there. And then tomorrow's assignment will be due as well. And Kyra, can I get you to move over to this screen and then just knock it down one slide? I'm going to bring the journal back up here in just a second. But just slide the mouse over to the right screen and then click it. Yep, there you go. So I've got a little list up here. These are our catch-ups, or things that need to be done before break. This Korea video quiz, that's what was from yesterday. If you weren't here yesterday, make sure that you get that watched. My hope is that some of you watched the quick intro video that I emailed out to everybody. And I told you that as you watch it, make sure you jot a few things down that you can use those notes as you take the quiz. If you didn't, then it's in your email. But that needs to be done. The Red Scare assignment, that's tomorrow. That needs to be done by Thursday before we go. And then your journal. So As long as we can check those 3 things off, then we'll be in good shape. Okay? All right. No, you get your hand up. Oh no. Why not? Yeah, right. Right on, brothers and sisters. Okay. All right. So with that said, I'm going to put that journal back up there. I'm going to give you enough time for me to take attendance real quick. We are going to run through some questions today. So I'm going to send those around. Make sure you have these in front of you so we can drive right in. And we are, at some point today, going to find out why Mr. Klein is not wearing a shirt and tie and is instead wearing a shirt featuring a turtle.
It's almost spring break.
No. Yes, we're going to my turtle friend today. All right, so here we go. Now, I kind of feel like today's discussion really got started with the e-learning assignment, which I'm hoping that everybody got done. It wasn't very hard, I don't think, was it? Yeah. Listen to some music, and answer a few questions. Just out of curiosity, had any of you heard those songs before? Any of those songs before? Yeah, Beach Boys. Yeah. So I don't know if you guys. I feel like there were two, as you listen to the music, two, maybe three big like trends that each of those songs should have brought out. Can anybody tell me something that they noticed that seemed like a commonality amongst all the songs that you had to listen to? They were annoying. Okay, so appealing towards a younger generation, absolutely. Anything else that you guys seem to notice amongst them? Yeah, Jesse. Okay, yeah, definitely a different sound. The last time we listened to a lot of music in here was the Roaring Twenties. Still the same sort of loud, but you're getting rid of the jazz music, and now you're moving into more of the, the guitar and things like that. Leah, what do you got?
Every song was like kind of on the desires of like people.
Yeah, I think so. In fact, I don't know if you picked up on this, but all of these songs were, I think, written, performed by either teenagers or very young adults, and all but one of them, I think, had some fairly blatant innuendos about sex. Let's call it what it is. In fact, the only song out of those that you listen to that I think don't have that woven in was probably Little Deuce Coupe by the Beach Boys. That's Little Deuce Coupe is pretty straightforward. It's about driving a car. That's just what it is. But the rest of them were about, I like how Aaliyah said it. That's much more of a polite and appropriate way to describe it. Desires. Yes, there we go. Right? But what's interesting there is I think that they all also represented a bit of rebellion against tradition. And I want you to kind of keep that in mind as we talk today, because today is a lot about change, but also a lot about efforts that were made to try to get the United States back to a certain mindset, a certain way of life that had existed prior to World War II. We saw this after World War I as well. Americans fed up with dying and killing and war, and they came back and wanted things just to go back to normal. World War II is no different. All right. In fact, there was a story that came out of Seattle, Washington. They were having a parade in Seattle. Veterans had come home. A lot of cities did these big parades. And after the parade was over, people were just in the streets having a good time. And a newspaper reporter came across an American GI, and who he assumed was this guy's wife or girlfriend, and said, hey, you're back. You're back from the war. What are you going to do now? And his response was, I'm taking her home, and we're going to make babies, and we're going to make house. Okay? So, yeah, right? Forget the innuendo. There you go. All right? Just got right to the point. But what I find interesting in that quote, once you kind of get past just the initial, about it, is that you've got this guy who's saying, what I want now is to go home with my wife, raise a family, and have little wife keep the house. Let's get back to what we had prior to World War II. That's the kind of normalcy that I want to get back to. So we're going to see some of that, I think, come through in today's discussion for sure. Let's start out with question one here, though. All right, before we get into, women maybe getting pushed back in traditional roles, let's get into some of the good news. And I think some of the biggest news is going to be in the area of science and medicine once we come back from World War II. This is huge. New drugs, new vaccines. When I say new drugs, I'm not talking about like Coke. Okay? I'm talking about like good drugs. Again, not talking about Coke. Okay? So we're talking about new drugs that are doing good. There we go. That's how I should describe it. Right? All right, and a few of these that stand out. I think penicillin is going to be right up there. Now, some of you may have taken it. In fact, I would frankly be shocked if some of you haven't taken penicillin, or is it sometimes called amoxicillin, this is sort of like the go-to antibiotic, maybe for a sinus infection, or if you had surgery, might be something that they give. This was called, quite literally, the wonder drug. It was developed on the battlefield in World War II. I think you guys know this. I know we talked about this in here, that in wars previous, the #1 killer of American soldiers was not getting shot on the battlefield. It was what? Say car sick? Oh, yes. Okay, that's right. Yeah. It's not car sickness. Yes. It is infection, battlefield wound infection. And so, there really wasn't any way to deal with that until they developed this drug. Now that the war is over, let's bring this back to the United States and, and start using this. It's still the go-to antibiotic, even since 1945. Huh? I can't either. I'm horribly allergic to it. But I hear it works well. My children have had to use it, and it's turned out well for them. So good for them. Me, I just have to deal with it. I guess. Just deal with the infection. Whatever.
I take that for my acne condition.
Now, another big one is the polio vaccine. You guys all were vaccinated for this when you were youth, so you don't have to worry about polio. But prior to this vaccine, this was the #1 fear, I think I can safely say that, of parents. Now, I know that none of you have that perspective yet, and you have a long time before you need to worry about it, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Having children, even. There we go. All right, anyway, but I can tell you, that, as a father, there is nothing that obviously scares you more than something happening to your kid. And, this was a disease that it could kill you, but more than likely it would leave you paralyzed. President Roosevelt, FDR, was paralyzed from the waist down. And the reason for that is because he had contracted polio. My great aunt, my grandmother's sister, she died in her 70s, so, she lived a full life. But when she was a child, she contracted polio. And, my memories of her are of just a very frail woman. And the reason for that is because polio just wrecked her body. This was a huge fear of parents. So when the vaccine for polio is developed, this is a huge sigh of relief for parents across the country that this is not something that we're going to have to deal with anymore. Let me give you a couple of statistics to show you just how different things become. By the time we get to 1956, and I think this is just nuts, 80% of drugs that are prescribed to Americans for whatever ailment you want to think of, 80% of all drugs that are used, that are prescribed to Americans, are drugs that had been developed after World War II. I think that is a staggering statistic. It really kind of makes you wonder how Americans stayed alive prior to World War II. What were they using? Leeches? I don't know. Hope. It's a powerful drug. We'll just hope this disease away. No, yeah. But, think about that, guys. 80% of drugs are prescribed. And, yeah, this is going to have a huge impact on things like average lifespan. In 20 years, from 40 to 1960, the average lifespan for an American is going to jump by almost 8 years. That may not sound like a lot to you, but that is a huge, huge shift in population. Okay, that is an entire population on average living 7 years longer. So that really is a big deal. And a lot of that is because of these new prescription drugs that we're able to have access to. I wanted to show you this. We've seen some of these before, but this is a newsreel that was put together when the polio vaccine came through. It'll give you a sense of just how this was done. This was a nationwide, just a huge, huge study that was undertaken to figure out if this thing would actually work. And I'll tell you, there's a name that's going to come up in this video. The guy who created the polio vaccine. That is a name that you're going to need to know. So make sure that you're listening carefully as we watch this very, very short newsreel about the polio vaccine.
This is polio, the cruel, centuries-old crippler of children. At large 77,000 times, These are actual polio viruses. To the University of Michigan campus in 1955 came hundreds of scientists hoping to hear the words that would signal the end of polio's long and ruthless reign of terror. Heading the medical men was Dr. Jonas Salk, whose polio vaccine had been tested and carefully evaluated. Copies of the official findings were wheeled in as Dr. Salk talked with his family on what was to be his day of magnificent achievement. Reporters pressed forward to get the results the whole world was waiting for.
You didn't catch the name, it's up there on the board.
Spread the momentous news. Inside the meeting hall, Dr. Salk on the right and Dr. Thomas Francis, director of the year-long study of the vaccine, awaited the arrival of the report. The room was electric with expectancy. Then the historic announcement. The vaccine works. It is safe, effective, and potent. The tests proved it up to 90% effective in preventing paralytic polio. Someday, said Dr. Salk, the vaccine may completely eradicate the menace of polio. Working at Pittsburgh University's Virus Research Laboratory, the 40-year-old Dr. Salk labored 3 years, often 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, to painstakingly perfect the vaccine before its mass testing. The serum contains polio virus, which, although killed, still has power to stimulate the body into producing millions of protective antibodies in the bloodstream, building a wall between children and paralytic polio. Early production of the virus vaccine was difficult, limiting the experiment. Even so, it was the largest such medical test ever attempted. 440,000 youngsters in 44 states were inoculated with the Salk vaccine, 210,000 received rummy shots, and more than 1 million other children were observed in comparison. Not a single child who completed the Salk vaccination died of paralytic polio. Laboratories immediately began turning out the precious serum for our nation's children.
All right, so that gives you a sense of just how big this study was. You know, well over 1.3 million children involved in it. That's a pretty exhaustive study, I think. And as you notice, they gave some of the kids the polio vaccine, some of the kids a dummy virus, and then sort of studied the impacts there. But yeah, this is a game changer. Same sort of vaccine that we're still getting today. And I mean, every now and then you'll see somebody that develops polio, but it's, I mean, like, you know, less than 1% of people are going to still develop that. Now, this is maybe a little less impactful on us personally, but you guys know as well as I do that some of these material type of items are things that have every bit as big an impact on our lives as anything else. There's going to be huge consumer changes that we're going to see develop at the same time period. And I think a lot of this speaks to Americans, as I said, trying to get back home, trying to get back to some normalcy, trying to get back to some more traditional ways of living. So, you know, how can we make the home life easier and better, better experience? Things that we take for granted, the freezer, the dishwasher, these are all things that are going to be developed at this time. Certainly in the world of automobiles, it's not like cars are a new invention. But look at the fact that there is not a single new automobile produced between the years of 1942 and 1945. The reason for that is obvious. What is it? Metal for the war, but also if you're going to have an auto company producing an automobile, it's going to be military grade, military jeeps, tanks, things like that. Once the war is over, though, look how quickly it spikes. 1950 alone, 6.9 million more automobiles made, jumps 1 million in 1955. What is the impact here? Number one, if they're making it, that means people are buying them. So that's going to be a huge impact on the market. But we're also going to have to see more attention paid to road construction. This is about the time that we start to see the first interstate highways in the United States. Right? Dwight D. Eisenhower, the president, right? The former American hero, general, now president. One of the biggest things that he is going to bring forward is the American interstate system. Anybody know where he got the inspiration for the interstates that we have in the country? Yeah, it's the Nazis. Okay, Hitler was known for building something that he called the Autobahn, right, which is a huge German interstate. The idea being more for military, that you could move military quickly. Eisenhower has the same idea. Our interstates were built initially so that it would make for easy and quick transport of the military. Now, however, and you guys know this because a lot of you drive. Obviously, it's a way to get from point A to point B, but now we're going to see those built now with more automobiles being made. By 1960, and again, I think this is a huge statistic here, 80% of families own at least one vehicle. This is a good age, a good time to be working in auto factories. And I also think it's interesting, these would probably be your great-grandparents, but a lot of the individuals who come back from World War II, they go into automobile factories. My grandfather was one of them who retired after 35 years up at GM and Marion. He started that job as soon as he got back from the war. This is a pretty common way for soldiers to get a job. Television. In 1946, only 8,000 homes across the country owned a television. I hope you can tell how small of a number that is. By 1960, it's gone from 8,000 homes to 45 million homes, and now all of a sudden television is something that people want to have access to. So you're going to see the creation of, the 30-minute sitcom. Advertising is going to start looking very, very different. Things like these posters that I still have up on the wall, they're going to lose some of their popularity because now we have this new visual medium. All right, so there's a lot of good there. However, what I think is, and this has always been something that interested me, was the way that television medium can impact, the way that Americans feel about certain subjects. And what I'm looking at here is, could television do some damage to the advancement of women in particular? Okay, these television shows are going to be written in such a way so that they appeal to Americans. So they're going to feature a lot of shows that take place in the home. And, and you're going to see a lot of the same sort of themes. Husband goes to work, husband rules the home, the wife is there to be dutiful and work in the kitchen, and when husband comes home, she's waiting with newspaper, pipe, and slippers. All right? And if you don't believe me, let's take a look at some popular television from the 1950s. We're going to look at two clips, each from a different show that was extremely popular during the time. The first clip is from a show that I doubt very many of you have ever heard of. It's called, look at the title. It's called Father Knows Best. Right there in the title, there you go. All right, and we're just going to watch the opening intro to the show. I want you to see, number one, how advertising was done back then. Okay, you're going to see an advertisement here that you would never see today. You would never see this kind of an advertisement today. And secondly, look at the way in which the woman is portrayed in the opening, just the opening sequence to this particular show.
Kent, the only cigarette with a micronite filter. With regular and the new king-size Kent, present the story of a man, his home, and his family, starring Robert Young and Jane Meyer. With Schuyler Donahue, Billy Ray, and Norman Chapin in Father Knows Best.
That's the name of the show. All right, so the second clip we're going to watch is from a show that I'd be willing to bet most of you have heard of, Leave It to Beaver.
Yeah.
Right. Hugely popular show. I grew up with Leave It to Beaver. Every time I was at my grandparents', this is what we were watching. This particular clip, though, it just, oh my gosh, it kills me. And ladies, if you're not angry at this clip, I don't know what to do for you. All right.
You know, Dad, it's funny.
What's funny?
Well, whenever we cook inside, Mom always does the cooking. But whenever we cook outside, you always do it. How come?
Oh, it's sort of traditional, I guess. You know, they say a woman's place is in the home, and I suppose as long as she's in the home, she might as well be in the kitchen.
Well, I say
All right, it gets better.
Then how come you always do the outside cooking?
Well, I'll tell you, son. Women do all right when they have all the modern conveniences. But us men are better at this rugged type of outdoor cooking. Sort of a throwback to caveman days. Hand me those asbestos gloves, would you, Ollie?
Right.
Well, there's no sense in us cavemen burning our hands.
I want to smoke
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I'm not going to say like
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it infuriates me, you know, and it bothers me to a great deal. But you know, if you watch other shows at this time, whether it's Bewitched or it's Dream of Jeannie, you know, you'll see these kind of messages that are woven in. And you know, I remember sitting down with my own grandmother, who was June Cleaver. Like my grandma was June Cleaver. She, you know, married. Never left the house. She stayed at home. My grandfather got home. Dinner was on the table. She raised the kids. She was June Cleaver. And I talked with her one time about whether or not she ever felt frustrated by that. You know, if she watched shows like this and got angry, she's like, no. This is, you know, this is what I wish more women would do. I thought, oh, Grandma, you drank the Kool-Aid, lady. You know, God rest her soul. But, you know, yeah, I mean, this type of stuff, it works. I mean, it absolutely makes an impact. All right, I want to finish up here. Hold on, I'm going to run out of time. I want to make sure you guys get your atomic bomb training. We're gonna watch this here in just a second. All right, and when we watch it, it's hilarious in many parts. Just because it's one of those things that is so ridiculous that it's really fun. It's really funny until you think about it. And, you know, you're going to watch this and you're going to say, how could Americans be so stupid to buy what this video is all about? How could American children really think that if an atomic bomb were dropped on Frankton, that hiding under a wooden desk will save you? Well, there's a simple reason why. And that's because it's difficult for anyone to accept the idea that if this were to really happen, it would likely be the death of hundreds and thousands of people. Like that's a reality that we can't wrap our mind around. But this is a legitimate thing, this fear that develops after the Soviets successfully test their atom bomb in 1949. At that point, the United States goes into paranoid protection mode. Not only are we trying to get Americans to chill out and not cause a massive panic that the Russians are going to bomb us, but we are also trying to stay one step ahead of the Russians in terms of the kind of weapons that we have. You know, we got an atom bomb, then the Russians get one. So what's next? What can we build that is stronger than an atom bomb? Let's go with a hydrogen bomb, bigger boom. And then eventually we'll move to nuclear. And so what the United States begins to do, because they need to test these things, they need to make sure that it will in fact make a big boom. And so we began to buy up islands in the Pacific Ocean. This is all into question 4 here. Right? We began to buy up islands in the Pacific, and we liked these atolls. We bought a group called Bikini Atoll, and then we bought this at Eniwetok. If you aren't sure what an atoll is, anybody know what an atoll is? Yeah, Tim. Yes. Yeah, but what it is it's the upper rim of a volcano that's underwater. And the parts of the volcano that are coming up out of the water, those islands make up an atoll. Usually an atoll is going to be in a circular shape, just like the cone of a volcano. And so when we get to these atolls in the Pacific, there are people living on them, but we just move them out. Pesky islanders. Move on. And then what we would do often with Inuitak is, you know, we went on there, we built homes, we built, you know, different buildings. We would take animals, livestock, put it on the island. We liked sheep particularly. And then, you know, we might take some old retired battleships and set them up around the island. And then we would explode a hydrogen bomb just to see what happens. Does it destroy buildings? Will it kill the livestock? Will it destroy the boat? Spoiler alert, the answer is yes to all. But the worst part of this was that once we had exploded these bombs, we would send American soldiers back to what was left of the island to research and see what the impact really was. All right, did the sheep die? Problem was that we were sending them to the island, in some cases, a few days after the test. So what were those soldiers unknowingly walking into? Huge amounts of radiation. And they wouldn't feel the effects initially, but a lot of these guys came home and started dealing with, you know, different defects, you know, like elephantitis of limbs was a huge impact. Boy, you guys walked in at a fun time. All right, we're talking about radiation poisoning. Elephantitis of the limbs is when your leg will literally just balloon, you know, 3 times its size. Massive cancers developing in people. Children being born with birth defects. Ethan, will you grab enough to get through? All right. I mean, it's a horrible deal. But we're doing this based out of fear that the Soviets are going to use one of these weapons on us. Right? So I had a clip from one of these tests, but I'm going to. I think it's much more important that you learn what to do if an atom bomb is dropped here than it is to watch one of the tests. So we're going to take the next several minutes here, and we're going to watch this actual, real educational clip. This was shown to elementary and so, you know, junior high age students, and, you know, some of you may know people. My parents remember watching this in school. But yeah, this was, it's one of those things that it's ridiculous. You're going to laugh, but I would encourage you to really think about what you're seeing. And you're going to start to, I think, see how the paranoia, the fear of these weapons really does mess with the heads of a lot of Americans. With that said,